History is often written in ink, but diplomacy is crafted in nuance, patience, and strategy. And I must say that very few have documented this delicate dance of nations as comprehensively as our esteemed speaker, Mr. Avtar Singh Bhasin. With a distinguished career spanning over 3 decades in Ministry of External Affairs, Mr. Bhasin has been a witness to and a custodian of India's foreign policy evolution. His tenure saw him posted in key diplomatic missions across Kathmandu, Bonn, Vienna, and Lagos, playing an integral role in numerous official, ministerial, and prime ministerial delegations. His transition from a diplomat to an academician has been nothing short of remarkable. As a senior fellow at the Indian Council of Historical Research and an honorary fellow at the Nehru Memorial Museum and Library, he has dedicated himself to chronicling India's foreign relations, a task of unparalleled significance. His seminal works include documentary studies on India's relations with Nepal, China, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka, as well as Pakistan, culminating in his magnum opus, a 10-volume compendium on India-Pakistan relations spanning from 1947 to 2007. His scholarship is not just a reflection of history, but a mirror to our present and a compass for the future. We all are honored to have him with us today to illuminate the art and intricacies of diplomatic negotiations as captured in his book, Negotiating India's Landmark Agreements. So, without further ado, it is my absolute privilege to invite Mr. A.S. Bhasin to share his insights into the nuanced art of diplomacy and India's landmark agreements. Sir, we eagerly await your wisdom.
Let me say afternoon to everybody who has joined us in the seminar. And I start with thanking Chanakya Policy Research Foundation for organizing this webinar to discuss my book, Negotiating India Landmark Agreements, published by Penguin Random House. Before I say anything about the book, I must appreciate the efforts of highly public conscious people who got together to create this body, the Chanakya Policy and Research Foundation. The foundation underlines the fact there's a much greater consciousness among the people, particularly the youth, about foreign policy issues which the foundation is trying to fulfill. It's a highly commendable effort. I would particularly underline my thanks and appreciation for Madam Tamanna, Madam Manohar, Shri Sherawat, and Madam Kaushiki. Coming to the book, I must say at the outset, it is not one state narrative of an issue, but there are 5 standalone issues that it discusses. While they are not interlinked issues, thematically there is a similarity in that they discuss how the 5 agreements spread over a period of over 6 decades were discussed and the results achieved. With these preliminary remarks, let me straight come to the book. In the almost 7 decades since independence, India has signed scores of agreements and treaties with many countries on various subjects. Some friendship, some for promotion of economic cooperation, trade, and still some other collaboration in the field of science and technology, and some even on esoteric subjects. In the globalized world we live in today, many problems cut across national boundaries and necessitate a multidisciplinary approach, like climate change, international trade, finance, nuclear issues, etc. On such issues, multilateral treaties become necessary, and India became party to many of them as well. Boundary agreements between neighbors fall in a different category altogether. They define the boundary lines, which are fundamental for peace and coexistence. Defined and mutually agreed upon boundaries between neighbors have intrinsic value and come into being as a result of understanding between them by adjustment of rival claims, interests, and ambitions at point of intersection. The five agreements discussed in this book are spread over 6 decades and have been selected for their long-term impact, benign or baleful, on future relations between the signatories and generally also. The first agreement of any significance that India signed after independence was with the People's Republic of China and Tibet. It was also called the Panchsheel Agreement. The need for it had become obvious after China had occupied Tibet in 1950, and the facilities and privileges inherited from the British had become incongruous with the new status. In any case, Prime Minister Nehru had described them as imperial inheritance. China, though uncomfortable, did not suggest renegotiation of them. It was India which suggested the renegotiation, since the Chinese had paralyzed the working of Indian trade agencies and other institutions. The 120-day discussions for the new agreement were held in Beijing from 31st December 1953 until 29 April 1954. In negotiating the agreement, it was China which dictated the terms of the agreement, and India, unmindful of interest, yielded to its diktats, failed to protect its minimum interest. In his approach to New China, Prime Minister Nehru somehow was both impressed and overawed by it, and had made friendship with China the major plank of Asian policy in the home of creating Asian solidarity. That China was insensitive to any of Indian concerns was brought home to India when China refused to include two passes, Rouen and Rudok, which directly linked Ladakh and Tibet for promoting trade and pilgrimage, on the plea that Ladakh, being part of Jammu and Kashmir, was a disputed territory between India and Pakistan, and China did not want to get involved in that. Indian argument that it was the question of India's territorial integrity did not cut ice with China, and cautioned India if it insisted on their inclusion, then there will be deadlock and no agreement at all. It was India which yielded and withdrew its proposal for inclusion of the two passes in the agreement. That India, being well aware of the uncertain status of its border with Tibet, decided not to discuss them was an unfortunate decision which cost us rather dearly later. Our present problems with China begin right here. Though described as an important agreement by the Prime Minister, it left only baleful impact on India's judgment of its relation with China. It led to Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai syndrome with all its sinister consequences. India's expectation that the reworked arrangements would facilitate the functioning of Indian institutions lesser, but completely belied. They became dysfunctional and finally had to be shut. In this brief introduction, it is not possible for me to go into all the drawbacks in the agreement or in the manner it was negotiated. Suffice it to say that it was a badly negotiated agreement which India had concentrated all its efforts to win the Chinese goodwill, which remained illusionary. Now we come to the Indo-Soviet Treaty 1971, which is next in the chronological order. And the treaty with the Soviet Union, August 1971, had its origin in the offer of such a treaty in 1969, volunteering to come to India's aid in any war with Pakistan or China. What was Soviet compulsion for this suggestion? At that time remained shrouded in mystery, particularly when India was quietly sailing through after 1962 and apprehended little or no threat to security. That was the time to conduct a due diligence of Soviet motives why a superpower was volunteering a treaty with the third world country. While D.P. Dhar, the ambassador in Moscow, was even then quite keen for the treaty and had come to Delhi to convey support for in its favor, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi had her reluctances. The two reasons which she had were, one, a treaty would damage India's non-aligned status. And secondly, the right wing in the Congress party was quite strong, would oppose it. The offer of the treaty was not rejected, but put on the back burner and restructured in 1971 to meet the situation then developing in East Pakistan, where China was threatening to enter the conflict on the side of Pakistan. It is pertinent to point out that India, while signing the treaty in 1971, had felt quite uncomfortable and tried to avoid it. External Affairs Minister Swaran Singh spent 2 days in Moscow on 7th and 8th June 1971, trying to persuade both Foreign Minister Gromyko and Premier Kosygin to issue instead a statement which would effectively prevent China entering the Indo-Pakistan conflict, which looked inevitable. The Soviets made it clear to Swaran Singh that there was no alternative to a treaty, and finally, India had to fall in line and sign it, which was justified at that time by the circumstances. Moscow's real intentions in insisting on the treaty unfolded after the Bangladesh War, when D.P. Dhar, who in the meantime had taken over as chairman of the Policy Planning Committee in the Ministry of External Affairs, after relinquishing his office in Moscow, accompanied by General Manik Shah, went to Moscow with a shopping list of arms to replenish war losses and some reserves. Moscow would not look at the list unless India signed yet another defense treaty specifically against China. Dhar reminding Gromyko the treaty signed only a few months earlier, in August 1971, would be enough to remind us of our obligations cut no ice with the Soviets. And since India remained reluctant to sign it, Moscow refused to give any arms. Both Dhar and Manik Shah had to return home empty-handed. And it was not until Prime Minister Indira Gandhi later wrote to Secretary General Brezhnev about the supply of arms that some movement took place. Well, that is one unfortunate story of how a superpower, when trying to deal with this smaller power, a third world country, tries to force certain issues on the other party. But I must say, India withstood the pressure and refused to sign that treaty, which would have been very harmful to India's long-term interests. Now we come to the Shimla Agreement. Shimla Agreement, the outcome of the war with Pakistan, was unique in that the defeated country, Pakistan, set the tone for the negotiation. Pakistan's problems were twofold: normalizing its relation with India and release of 93,000 prisoners of war and delinking of the two issues. And of its concern was not to let Kashmir issue become part of the discussion on Bangladesh. India's initial expression of readiness for talks with Pakistan at any time, at any level, and without any precondition encouraged Pakistan in its negotiating posture. It took the Pakistan took the firm stand and discouraged any attempt on the part of India to bring the Kashmir issue in the discussion. India, while normalizing relations, was not willing to the release of the prisoners of war without Pakistan first recognizing the newborn Bangladesh, for which Pakistan was not ready. Initially, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, the new president of Pakistan, had lobbied with various countries, particularly Western, for their help to persuade India for release of prisoners of war. So much so that ambassadors of France, Denmark, West Germany, and UK cautioned both the Soviet and the Indian ambassadors in Dhaka separately that any trial of prisoners of war would take a serious turn and any possibility of understanding with President Bhutto would be ruled out. Bhutto too had visited various countries, including Soviet Union, to convey support for his stand. He had real success in Moscow, since the Soviet Union had curbed Indian desire to settle the Kashmir issue. When D.P. Dhar had visited Moscow in February 1972, Soviets had expected a promise that India would, quote, do nothing to alter the present territorial status quo on the ceasefire line in Kashmir by force or other means. Even the French and some other countries had cautioned India to keep Kashmir out of the similar negotiations. Mr. Gandhi too had assured Moscow that India had no desire to treat Pakistan as a vanquished power, nor did India have any appetite for territorial gains. Just before the negotiations began in Shimla, Pakistan had sent a message to Mr. Gandhi through Moscow that Pakistan would not agree to a settlement which would be dictated by India, and that the settlement should be honorable, honest, just one for both the countries. Otherwise, there will be no settlement, and that would have disastrous effect. Pakistan, having set the agenda for the talks, stuck to it and at no time made any compromise. On the question of prisoners, Bhutto too did not make any compromise, even when he could not get the release immediately. His main concern was Kashmir, and he successfully warded off any pressure. At the end, he got away in one-to-one talks with Mrs. Gandhi that he would settle Kashmir issue on ceasefire line, but later. Bhutto undoubtedly proved himself a clever negotiator. Starting from a position of greatest possible disadvantage and weakness, he finally succeeded to extricate his 93,000 prisoners of war, warded off a solution of Kashmir, and recovered lost territories in western region without considering any such substance to India. India could only take solace in the fact that it has split Pakistan. Whether the splitting of Pakistan and creation of Bangladesh in the long run has proved of any advantage to India, this still has to run for some more distance for the time to pronounce its judgment. Now we move to the fourth agreement that is that India-Sri Lanka Accord of July 1987. It was a highly toxic foreign policy initiative. When caution was thrown to the winds, our small neighbor, Sri Lanka, had inherent problem between its two linguistic communities, 74% Sinhalese and 12% Tamils. Paradoxically, the real culprit was democracy, which is based on majoritarianism. Minority Tamils fears at the time of independence that a democratic constitution would set up an irremovable communal oligarchy in perpetual power and pave the way for an immutable succession of his Nala, Buddhist prime minister, was willing of a peace. After the British withdrawal from the island, Tamil's failure to find an equilibrium in promoting their language and culture in comparison to the majority Sinhala community created combustible situation in which India imprudently got sucked in willingly and voluntarily with unfortunate consequences impacting its neighborhood policy. India's policy at this stage suffered from contradictions. When, while initially it was feared that Elam, that is independence, would have profound implication and could lead to pan-Tamil movement in South India. On the other hand, it was feared in high official circles that if Tamils were not helped, it might lead to alienation of Tamil Nadu. This was the conclusive argument used to continue the Indian support for the Tamils. Any policy or decision with long-term and wide implications must be well considered. No due diligence was done of Tamil demands, whether they were reasonable, they were being supercilious on insisting that the language of 12% should be national language like that of 74% Sinhala. India is interceded with Colombo to work out policies that would accommodate Tamil point of view. But it was the Tamils who found every solution unacceptable to them. India knew but found itself helpless that its policies had made them more intransigent and unaccommodative of any reasonable solution. India, due to Tamil Nadu's pressure, also found it difficult to extricate itself from its involvement, thus leading to the deeper and deeper involvement. Having involved itself in Tamil imbroglio, it was purely out of a sense of bravado that India in July 1987 signed an agreement with the Sri Lankan government undertaking to disarm the very people it had armed and was helping until then the two involving Indian army. The agreement was a such affair and signed. The Tamils had decried it, pleaded against it. India learned rather late and at high cost that getting involved in the domestic affairs of a small neighbor and do militarily, whatever the circumstances, was a policy inherently flawed and cost India both prestige and national honor. It is so geographically placed, India is so geographically placed that it is surrounded by neighbors who are not contiguous among themselves and must interact with each other only through India. This has been an annoying and exasperating fact of their geography. India, at times, by the domineering attitude, drove them to adopt policies which cut at its own interest by causing to outside powers. The manner in which the above four agreements were negotiated and the experience has neither been exciting nor stimulating. I think now that we are going to discuss the fifth agreement, we'll find a thrilling and stimulating experience. As it happened, in entering the Civil Nuclear Energy Agreement with the United States, a superpower, it was a superpower which reversed its own policies it had been pursuing for almost a quarter of a century. It was in 1974 that the United States had placed India under sanctions after India had experimented with its peaceful nuclear explosion. The five nuclear powers, the United States, Soviet Union, Britain, France, and China, had together formed a cartel in nuclear non-proliferation treaty, denying India or any other country the right to develop nuclear power for its defense. It was conceited of them to think that they alone were responsible nations with right to possess nuclear weapons. The result of Indian implosion was that United States adopted legislation which sought to contain and restrain India's ambitions to develop nuclear power, even for its economic development. But after China had exploded the atomic bomb in October 1964, India found itself vulnerable to China's nuclear blackmail and continued its research in nuclear technology. And finally, in 1998, crossed the Rubicon and gave notice to the world that it had become unambiguously, unapologetically, and irrevocably its nuclear power. Already under sanctions, it came under additional sanctions. At the turn of the millennium, United States saw emerging India as a global economic power based largely on the creativity of its people. The diaspora's contribution in America's economic development was seen so impressive that Washington felt it necessary to seek a broad based and deep relationship with India, which President Bush sought at the urging of Condoleezza Rice, his national security advisor in the first term and Secretary of State in the second term. India collectively proceeds. Washington disquieted China's assertiveness in Asia, particularly after the collapse of the Soviet Union and its refusal to follow the rule-based order in South China Sea and looked at it as an opportunity which received with both hands. India, responding to the need of the hour, too gave up its agitations of the past, responding positively to the overtures coming from Washington. It may be recalled that India's scientific community and bureaucracy were alienated since the suspension of supply nuclear for the Tarapur nuclear power plant after India's experimental with nuclear explosion in 1974. India's political leadership, however, convinced that economic transformation of India was not possible without at least working relationship with the global hegemon, the United States, whose order prevailed globally. Sorry. American warming up to India came in the second term of President Bush, with Dr. Rice taking over as Secretary of State. It was he who had suggested a new policy towards South Asia and dehyphenation between India and Pakistan. It was during the visit of Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh to Washington, July 2005, that window of opportunity opened and negotiating for an agreement such civil nuclear energy opened among officials of two countries in right earnest. Indian officials went through many rounds of negotiations, spread almost for over 3 years, matching weight for weight with the American negotiators, but did not blink for a moment. There were occasions when the American side felt exasperated by discussing final points, but the Indian negotiators neither lost their cool nor desisted from making their point. It was the first time in American constitutional history, at least since 1954, act was passed when this act was adopted by the US Congress and the legislature authorized the executive branch to enter into an agreement for nuclear energy with India. Again, it was the United States which prevailed upon the naysayers among the NSD countries to enter into nuclear trade with India. Throughout the fractious political process, Indian negotiators were sustained by confidence that the Indian public understood the logic and supported the initiative. The media understood the logic and supported the initiative. Sorry. The media chattered and sensationalized depending on the prevailing wind of the day. Politicians and political parties supported or opposed the initiative depending on their attitude towards the ruling party government rather than on the basis of the substance of the issue. That the government went ahead with the agreement despite some domestic hurdle is another story and underlined the government determination not to let the opportunity fade away in the early birth of India's flexuous politics. India secured capabilities that did not have before, and the world around India changed too rapidly and quickly that India could get a place on the high table. India now could access nuclear and missile technologies, access dual use technology, as well as enter into nuclear trade with the NSG countries. NSG means Nuclear Supplies Group countries. India irrevocably and irreversibly breached the nuclear barrier that had fettered it for decades and ceased to be pariah. All sections melted away. Whatever restrictions were still there on some entities have recently also been removed under the same 2008 agreement, thus underlying its continued relevance and importance. Learning from the experience of Tarapur, India insisted and got the right to reprocess the spent fuel produced by a nuclear reactor. That India ever, after 16 years of the agreement, failed to import even a single nuclear reactor from the United States is to look at the agreement from a narrow point of view. Seen in the larger perspective, the agreement was not for reactors only, but for the entire gamut of nuclear and missile technology, reprocessing of spent fuel, nuclear trade with NSG countries, and much more. Let me say at the end, but for that agreement, the present state of relation between India and United States have, that United States have constructed since then would not have been possible. The basic problem with the negotiating process in India, lack of parliamentary supervision. You know, under the Indian Constitution, the executive is not factored by parliamentary position. It can enter into any agreement with any power and without ever asking parliament approval. After the agreement is signed, the agreement placed on the table of the parliament for acceptance. There's no way that parliament could compel the government to undo the agreement or amend the agreement. In the last 75 years or 77 years of India's independence, no agreement has ever, which has been signed by the government, has ever been amended or withdrawn under the pressure of parliament. Parliament can discuss the agreement after it has been signed, but only give its opinion one way or the other, but cannot compel the government to amend it or to withdraw it. And that is the end of the story. So the government of India or the executive is totally free to enter into any agreement it likes without parliamentary approval first time. With that, I say thank you very much for all of you who have listened to me and thank you for your patience. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your masterful presentation on important treaties of India and the depth of diplomacy hidden behind them. Through your words, we have truly witnessed the strategic foresight that shaped India's global engagements and discourse. Now, to ensure that this session resonates with the same intellectual vigor as Mr. Bhasin's lecture, we are now opening the floor for questions. This is an opportunity to further enrich the dialogue, so feel free to raise your hand and we will invite you to share your question.
Good evening, sir. First of all, it's an honor to listen to you, and the session was really great. Apart from that, sir, my name is Ambar and I'm a student pursuing graduation from Delhi University. Sir, my question is with regards to the Shimla Agreement of 1972, which was envisioned as a landmark accord to establish forever lasting peace between India and Pakistan. However, subsequent conflicts like the Kargil War of 1999, and most recently we have seen that how Pakistan is sponsoring terrorism on Indian soil and subsequently attacking India's security assets. So, is there any scope of any further agreements or any other landmark agreement that could finally put an end to this conflict-like situation between India and Pakistan and the territorial disputes? Is there any resolution to that?
Well, I am afraid the answer is in the negative. We are taught the Shimla Agreement would help us to have a long-term peaceful relationship with Pakistan. And that is why India was generous, accommodative in giving Pakistan a very good agreement. It released the 93,000 prisoners. It returned the territories in Western Pakistan also, which were captured by India in 71 war, just to create goodwill. But Pakistan being Pakistan, it turned back to the old ways immediately after prisoners were released and everything went back as usual. And that was the end of their friendship and end of their being nice people. They returned to old ways. They started singing the same song of Kashmir, Kashmir, Kashmir. And I do not see any possibility, at least in the foreseeable or distant future, whereby Pakistan would come to a stage that it will like to have a peaceful settlement with India for times to come. Though it has its economy suffering, yet it is not mindful of that and goes ahead with this sort of, for instance, there's no trade between India and Pakistan. We are next door neighbors. So much could be exchanged at little cost because there's hardly any freight involved. But they import it from distant places. So what can you do to a country which refuses to have a peaceful living and a sort of friendly relationship?
Next question is from Ridik Parashar. They said their question is regarding the Indo Waters Treaty. Does it need a ratification? Their question is regarding the Indus Water Treaty. Does it need any ratification in the current times?
Well, that is a question of the two countries agreeing. India has some problem with the amendments. So the discussions are going on. There was a meeting recently, and let us see how it works out. But India remains reluctant to change it in the way Pakistan wants it. We want to get out of it, in fact. Because we had been very generous in giving more water to Pakistan when this agreement was signed. Today, it will be in Pakistan's, it will be against Pakistan's interest if it is to be revised wholesale.
Truly agreed with it, sir. So next question we have from Aryan Thapa. Aryan, you can go ahead.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
So myself, Aryan Thapa, research intern at CPRF. And so my question is from chapter 5, sir. So history of India-US relation is a road from estranged to engaged democracy. And sir, the India's explosion of nuclear devices has triggered fresh sanctions from the US. And moreover, sir, in order to pursue this agreement, the US Congress passed the Hyde Act in 2006, which allowed US to share technology with New Delhi, bypassing the proliferation hurdles. Sir, so do you think that this agreement was an important measure to control the rise of China? That's my first question. And the second question, sir, is 2008 agreement helping India in reshaping the India's position in global nuclear diplomacy? Sir.
You see, as far as China is concerned, it was America which helped China to rise. They have given them money, they have given the technology. But after the collapse of Soviet Union, they found that China has grown too big and was challenging the supremacy. And both not only in political, but also in economic terms, in financial terms also. Though America now got conscious that what they have really helped to promote is a big monster which might cut at their interest at the end. So now they want decided that its rise should be, they couldn't be rolled back, but at least try to stop it or not create a rival which could restrain China in Asia. And they found India, the next door neighbor, was the right country to, and India too had its own score to settle. So India had no difficulty in joining America, United States, into working out policy which would stem the rising tide of China in Asia. So it is definitely to stem the tide of rising China in Asia that India also agreed, and America was interested in friending India and withdrawing all these restrictions which they had placed since 1974. Why were they so anxious to withdraw these conditions, these sanctions which they had imposed? Because they now wanted India for another purpose. And it suited India also. Here, the interest of India and the interest of United States converged. We were also anxious to stop the Chinese rise and being a superpower in this area. America was also interested in the same. So it was the convergence of objective of both the countries, and both the countries were willing to cooperate. We were getting in the process nuclear technology, which had been banned to us in 74, and also helping us in trying to stem the tide of rising China and Asia. I'm sorry, what is your next question?
Sir, is that 2008 agreement helping reshaping India's position in global nuclear diplomacy?
Well, it did help. The type of relations we have since developed with America would not have been possible had this agreement not in place. After this agreement was signed in 2008, that Indo-American relations started moving up. And these relations which have developed in recent years would not have been possible if those sanctions which were there before this agreement was signed were still in place. You would have recently noted that President Biden, just few days before he demitted office, withdrew some of the still pending sanctions against certain nuclear entities. Those were also withdrawn under the same 2008 agreement. So the elements of agreement continues. This buying of reactors is a very small thing. Generally, public thought that this whole agreement is to buy reactors. It was not to buy reactors. It was to get technology, both nuclear, missile technology, and dual-use items, etc. Reactors were a very small part of it. Am I clear?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so next we have the question from Parth. Parth, you can go ahead.
Hello, sir. My name is Parth, and I'm pursuing my master's in political science from Central University of Hyderabad. So my question is regarding the Indo-Soviet Treaty of Peace, Friendship, and Cooperation in 1971. So, given the India's leadership in the non-alignment movement, so how was the treaty received by other NAM countries at that time? Did it cause a tension within the movement, particularly among the nations that were skeptical of Soviet influence, or was it largely viewed as a necessary strategic adjustment rather than a deviation from a strategy of non-alignment, particularly for India?
My friend, this was one reason for reluctance to sign the treaty in the first instance when it was offered in 1969. If we had signed it then, without a fear of any danger from any source, without any threat to our security, then of course non-aligned country would have commented on it or would have their views. But when we signed it in September 1971, it was under threatening circumstances. And other countries had to appreciate the reasons why India has gone into this deal. And there were hardly any comment from any country because they understood the position. If we had signed a second treaty which Soviet Union was insisting, then we would have come under a lot of criticism. But Prudently, DP Dhar refused to this suggestion coming from Soviet Union to sign yet another treaty which was specifically against China and was a defense alliance. That we did not sign. But 71 August Treaty was under circumstances which people had to understand, and they did understand it.
Yes, Kaushiki.
We have noticed that time and again, India has faced certain and many betrayals when it comes to engaging in diplomatic engagements. We have tried to be peaceful. So, sir, do you think to avoid these betrayals in future, should we adopt a more Machiavellian approach and go for more strategic deception and being more realist to protect our interest?
We're talking of China.
Yes, sir, with China and also with Pakistan. Do you think we should also have that
See,
Machiavellian approach?
Machiavelli approach doesn't help. It is better to be honest and place the cards on the table. And then any agreement, any understanding coming under those circumstances will be durable and more desirable. By Machiavellian, you might get hold of some ticklish situation. That is a separate issue altogether. But when we're looking at the long-term interest of the country and long-term peace, then it is better to be honest and putting cards on the table. A treaty is endurable and long-lasting when it is signed with clear hearts, not a Machiavellian approach. That treaty will not last long, and there will be misunderstanding immediately thereafter.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so next we have Johan. Johan, you can.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, sir. Am I audible?
Good evening.
Sir, I have a question. Sir, how significant is the consular access agreement of 2008 about improving humanitarian conditions, considering the current delays and ongoing delays about exchanging of prisoners between the two countries?
Which prisoners you are talking about?
Sir, about the consular access agreement of 2008.
It is not about prisoners. I have not understood the question. I'm sorry. Which prisoners are you talking about?
Sorry, sir.
I beg your pardon. Would you like to clarify?
Yes, Johan, would you like to clarify? Sir is asking.
Sir, how does the consular access agreement of 2008 is significant in today in improving humanitarian conditions that are such as considering the exchange of prisoners and the ongoing delays of exchanging of prisoners?
No, you are talking of these Palestinian questions, the Palestinian prisoners.
No, sir, between India and Pakistan.
Where are the prisoners? Between India and Pakistan, where are the prisoners? Those prisoners
Johan,
were
you could
captured
write
in
your questions in
93,
the chat.
in 1971 were released long ago. In 1990, sorry, in 1973 or so were they released. Today, there's the question of prisoners who are caught on the high sea by fishing in the Pakistani waters. And then Pakistani Navy arrest them and then they are released after discussion. But there is no problem of prisoners between India and Pakistan. I am sorry, I am not able to understand what you are referring to as prisoners.
Johan, if you can clarify, then it would be good. Otherwise, we need to move on.
No, sir, I'm sorry that it's about my misunderstanding.
Okay, fine. Tamanna, please carry on.
Okay, so there's this other question, sir. He asked in the chat box, like, what are your views about the recent Kazan breakthrough with China, given the complex parity between India and China?
Well, this is outside the purview of my thought, but nevertheless, any agreement, any easing of tension is good. It is not the final. It's the interim arrangement, you can say, that certain sticking issues were sorted out and both are happy. And now they are going ahead with further easing of relations. So that is a good thing that has happened to that extent. Whatever little easing happens is good for relations and good for everybody. But this is not the solution of the problem, which is still there.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. I would like to ask if there any other question you would like to ask. Okay, so I guess with regarding the time constraints, we'll carry forward. So to conclude, Sir's insightful discussion on their book Negotiating India's Landmark Agreement offered a masterclass in diplomacy and statecraft that India has adopted. His book provided an parallel analysis of India's treaty making from the 1954 India-China Agreement to the 2008 Indo-US Civil Nuclear Deal, which highlights the complexities and the strategic considerations behind each of them. Sir has emphasized in the need that agreements are not just the legal documents, but reflections of how they are national aspirations and long-term visions. So in today's evolving geopolitical landscape, your work holds immense relevance, offering crucial lessons for navigating challenges in real life areas like Indo-Pacific, and not to forget the energy security as well. So here at the Chanakya Policy Research Foundation, we express deep gratitude for your invaluable contribution, and we look also forward for the future collaborations as well. So your decades of research, from publishing landmark volumes on India's bilateral relations, then to curating official documents and archives, has given us a trove of knowledge. So your commitment to preserve this diplomatic history is completely invaluable, sir. So here I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude, and also the participant who kept the meeting engaging and the discussion a fruitful session. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Tamanna, for these very generous remarks again, which earlier had come from Kaushiki. So both of you have been very, very generous. And I particularly thank your foundation for organizing this discussion and giving me an opportunity to talk to you and to your other listeners. And I say your foundation are doing commendable work. Today, there's a lot of appetite for this foreign policy issues, and people are much more conversant. People are much more eager to know about what is happening around, because when leaders talk, they talk in high terms. It is the duty and of the foundation like you to convey their message in simple words to the people. And through these seminars, through these things, you are doing that very important duty of educating the people at the people's level. Not high-sounding sort of thing, but really simple words. And I am happy if I have contributed little in that direction. Thank you.
All
much.
possible with your, so it's all possible because of your help. So we are very grateful and thankful for that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Kaushiki?
Thank you, Mr. Manna, for your kind words. Ladies and gentlemen, that was the co-founder and president of CPRF, Mr. Manna. So now, as we bring this illuminating session to a close, let us remember that history does not merely reside in the past. It informs us about our present and shapes our future. The lessons of diplomacy, as articulated by Mr. Bhasin, remains ever relevant in India's aspirations on the world stage. For those eager to delve deeper in the book, Negotiating India's Landmark Agreements, it is more than a mere book. It is a chronicle of India's strategic negotiations and a testament to its diplomatic resolve. You can order your copy from Amazon or access the ebook version from Kindle. On behalf of CPRF, I extend my deepest gratitude to Mr. A.S. Bhasin to make this event possible, to contribute in the greatest way possible, and for his invaluable contributions. And also to the audience for their engagement and thought-provoking questions. Let us continue to question, reflect, and shape the discourse of our time. Thank you and good evening. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.